TV, advancing kingdom lifestyle.
Ladies and gentlemen, in this week's episode of the Gigi Report, I take you into a very interesting conversation on the celebration of the 11th anniversary of the 2010 Kenya Constitution. Very interesting conversation, various stakeholders, amazing conversation. Join me.
Tushangilie Kenya, taifa letu tukufu, Kenya tunayoipenda, Kenya nchi tunayoipenda.
Twajivunia sana tukijiita wa Kenya, nchi yenye baraka, Kenya nchi yenye baraka.
We are here to celebrate this constitution. We are not taking it for granted that we are here. And how did we get here? We know the sacrifices that each and every one of you have made. We just want to remind even Christians and even non-Christians, and whether you are a lawyer or not, that the Constitution is so much yours. It's not a document for lawyers. It is your contract. Know it, be intimate with it, and stand with it. All of it. Protect it. You know that we are in a time that one of the things the Constitution was trying to help us is to stop personalization of power, so that we have institutions, we have check and balance, and all those good things. So Judge Nyachae, the friend of the Constitution and our friend, please come and address us.
Let me begin my remarks, first of all, by appreciating everybody who is here, who in one way or another, as a stakeholder, has contributed to where we are at in a positive sense as regards the implementation of the 2010 Constitution. And of course, there are several people here who contributed in a huge way over a period of many years to the actual realization of that Constitution. Some of the people here, at one point or another, we were in the trenches together, so to speak, leading up to the realization of the 2010 Constitution. And it's always very encouraging when I see the consistency and commitment of many of the people here and many of the people who are not at this particular moment here with us. So I am appreciating those who are here, and I am appreciating those who are not here but have remained consistent in their affirmation and support for the Constitution of Kenya 2010. Let me, because I'm sure my friend Dr. Ojwang, the main reason that he has asked me to speak is because I was privileged, along with 8 other Kenyans, we were privileged to be the people who took up the mandate which is provided for in the transitional provisions of the Constitution to oversee, to implement and to coordinate the implementation of the 2010 Constitution. That is the Commission for the Implementation of the Constitution, on which I served between 2010 and 2015. Let me go to the point at which we were exiting as CIC when we were handing over to Parliament and to the people of Kenya our exit report. Put briefly, we stated that as regards the laws that were required to implement the Constitution of Kenya 2010, we felt that as a country we had done fairly well as regards the implementation of those laws. Some are still problematic even up to today. That is 11 years after the promulgation of the Constitution and 6 years after CSC terms expired. That is why, for example, you see the campaign financing legislation, election campaign financing legislation is still problematic. That is why you see the whole contemplated legislation around the gender issue, the not more than 2/3 gender issue that is required by the Constitution is still problematic. So other than those, as far as the laws are concerned, we thought we did fairly well. Then there were the regulations that were mainly still outstanding to be carried out. But the area that we specifically stated in our exit report that as a country we had done very poorly was in the area where the Constitution required and contemplates the inculcation of a culture of constitutionalism within amongst the people and amongst the institutions. Now, sadly, in my own observation, and that's why I thought I would start from there, sadly, in my own observation, on that particular failure of inculcating a culture of constitutionalism, I feel that we have gone from bad to worse. And in saying this, perhaps I may be provoking a conversation which would be a good thing. I think there are very many examples of when I say we are going from bad to worse in terms of inculcating a culture of constitutionalism. And apart from the people that I have paid tribute to and appreciated, who have remained consistent in seeking to ensure that the spirit of the Constitution is carried out, somewhere along the line as a country, we seem to have dropped the ball. And those that are expected, in my view, in the Constitution, particularly after the exit of the transitional body of which I was a member to oversee the implementation of the Constitution, as a country, it's very unclear who actually is overseeing the implementation of the Constitution. So that has left us as a country in a situation where actually nobody seems to take responsibility to ensure that the Constitution is implemented as contemplated. When I look at the issue that we are looking at here today of, is the Constitution just barking, or is the Constitution, can it bite? I want to commend the judiciary of the National Judiciary of Kenya, because I think it has demonstrated to a large extent that this Constitution bites. I'm not going to refer to any specific matters, because some of the matters that they have demonstrated that the Constitution bites are still live matters in court, but I still do commend them to that extent. I would want to take this opportunity in particular to urge the Parliament of Kenya, that is the two houses, to rise up to their constitutional responsibility in safeguarding and protecting the Constitution of Kenya 2010.
First, I think it is important to acknowledge that 11 years on, we have a constitution which forms the basis of national discourse. And that, I think, is important because it defines the parameters within which the political class must operate even when they are unwilling to do so. And it's instructive that you prefaced your intervention by saying that part of the problem that we suffer from is what my good friend and teacher Okoth Ogendo wrote about in 1972, constitutions without constitutionalism. And I think Yash Gai has also spoken to it when he talked about the fate of post-Berlin Wall constitutions, when he observed that Africa is a graveyard of beautifully written constitutions which are honored in breach. And that must be attributed to history, and I think that sense of history is something that we must give its pride of place. The 2010 Constitution was in many ways a product of a ceasefire, and it is not lost on me that when we were at Boma, some people were saying that you cannot have a constitution in peacetime. They were doing the work of prophets without the gift. But ultimately we had a near civil war, which when I look at some of these politicians, and there is no shortage of them in this country, who speak with both sides of the mouth, forget that this constitution in many ways has succeeded in immunizing us against some of the problems that would have visited us but for the Constitution. And this is what makes me come to what Charles talked about, constitutionalism, the culture of living the Constitution, the culture of giving meaning to the letter and what is sometimes described as the spirit of the Constitution. What we now see is that we have a document, in my view, which in many ways, if implemented in good faith, can address those historical problems that we had. Because number one, we argued when we were making the Constitution that we had an overbearing executive. This Constitution now creates for us an executive who is subject to constitutional dictates. But the question is, has the habits of old died, or old dogs don't learn new tricks? But the beauty is we can now say with confidence that generally if this constitution is implemented in good faith, there are many things that it can achieve. The second issue that I want to advert to is the question of how to deal with the teething problems of a constitution. This constitution has been serving us. What is the character of the executive that we have? Is it better than the one that we did away with? What is the character of the legislature? How has our devolution worked? How has the judiciary worked? How have the constitutional commissions worked? We renamed our police force, police service. Is it a service? Or the old habits have not died? We renamed our prisons correctional institutions. Are they better now? These are the questions that we ought to put on the table. We created the devolved units. Is service delivery better now? Or there are things that can be done? And I think that there is wisdom in asking ourselves those fundamental questions, if only to ensure that the Constitution improves the quality of our lives. That is why we have constitutions. And which brings me to my last point, that as we celebrate 11 years of the promulgation of this Constitution, we must remember that there are fifth columnists within our ranks. We must remember, if you allow me to use this term loosely, counter-revolutionaries within our ranks. And that they are within the political class. I will not name them, but I see them on a daily basis. Across the political divide, same ones. I saw them in 1980s when I was a student. I saw them in 1991 when I was in the Law Society. I saw them at the Bomas of Kenya. I continue to see them. These individuals allow me a little melodrama. We may have come out of the Egypt of the old Constitution, but Egypt resides in them. And I want to tell you that as long as those individuals are alive and well and active in Kenyan politics, they will use all manner of stratagem to torpedo this Constitution. We must not allow it. So on this occasion, it becomes necessary to be vigilant. My joy, and this is what I conclude with, my joy is that to its credit, the judiciary has become emboldened and is now standing up and staring down the political players, but they will not give up. It is our duty to keep our voices alive and well, even if our voices are not heard at their most eloquent, so that history may say that at critical moments there were men and women who are warriors for truth and justice. And it is our duty to speak this truth without fear or favor and without fear of consequence, without being suicidal.
I'm extremely delighted to be here today to celebrate with you the 2010 Constitution. I think I want to start very briefly from the conversation or the talking down that SG Ogeto was making in his submissions before the Court of Appeal, his opening statement in relation especially to the use of Wikipedia as a source of a definition of popular initiative. A conversation that I think has continued when you look at the judgment or the opinion of Judge Okwengu in the Court of Appeal decision. In talking down or speaking down to sort of Wikipedia, what Ogeto was doing in a sense was looking down at the idea of common, of a global common as a source of legitimate knowledge. The whole idea of looking down upon common property, our commons or African commons, as worthy of protection or as worthy of fidelity. My engagements in the context of the Constitution really were focused precisely on some of those challenges. The challenge of protecting marginalized communities whose vision and whose version of property did not necessarily comport with the mainstream version, which is individualized property that is evidenced by way of title. And so what we were successful in doing through the 2010 Constitution is the recognition not only of the identity of marginalized communities, and the embedding of their rights in the context of Article 56, but more than that, the recognition of their viewpoint in relation to land and property in Article 63, the recognition of community land tenure. I want to submit, Judge Ochai and Professor Lumumba and colleagues, that if there is a domain of the Constitution that continues to want for implementation, that continues to crave deep and sustained work, it is in this area of deconstructing our property relations, because it goes to the very heart of the livelihoods and the survival of our people and our communities, especially those who are most downtrodden. I say this because notwithstanding the existence of these frameworks and these parameters, I think we have continued to witness over the last 11 years such flagrant violations of human rights that these communities face. And I think we have all witnessed the gross levels and the indignified manner in which communities have been evicted. I don't have to go all the way to Emberwood Forest or to Mao Forest, but even right not far from here, in Kibra, in Mukuru Kwaroben, and Mukuru Kwanjenga, these are communities that continue to live in our country, but they continue to live as if the 2010 Constitution is not relevant to their lived reality. And so while we may and we should and we must extol the achievements that we have made thus far, I think there is still so much work to be done. And while we continue to celebrate what has been achieved, especially through our progressive judiciary, the kind of jurisprudence that has emerged, I think when you look at the jurisprudence in relation to land, I think you see actually a deep and concerning retrogression. I mean, if you study keenly the jurisprudence of the Supreme Court in the National Land Commission matter, when you compare that with the jurisprudence of the same Supreme Court in the Speaker of the Senate matter, you can clearly see a dissonance and a reluctance on the part of the judiciary to really engage with these relations and to begin to use the transformative provisions of the Constitution to deconstruct our land and property relations. But because I've been given only a very short time, I want to end by saying that aside from what has been submitted very ably, I think the other issue that we must be concerned about is this whole idea of institutional capture. You envisioned, I call you the fathers of the 2010 Constitution, you envisioned the existence of independent commissions as carriers and protectors and safeguarders of our sovereignty, or the people's sovereignty. But regrettably, when you look at the performance of our commissions, very few of them, I must say, inspire confidence. I think today, it is so easy for human rights violations to be perpetrated, gross, massive violations of human rights to be perpetrated without a word from the so-called National Commission on Human Rights, despite its robust mandate. Today, it is so easy for there to be a failure of gender justice, notwithstanding the existence of the Gender and Equality Commission. Today, land grabbing is alive and well by other means, notwithstanding a robust commission, the so-called National Land Commission. And so there is a lot of work that remains to be done. But I take courage and I take confidence in seeing ordinary citizens represented, I think more recently, by the person of Oluchier, whose advocacy before the High Court and the Court of Appeal, especially in the BBI matter, and especially touching on the question of presidential immunity, was so canvassed and dramatized before the entire nation. It is citizens like Oluchier who will remain vanguards and protectors of our constitutional order. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I really stand here to say thank you very much for the work that you do, the contribution you have made, and the work that you still have to do.
So thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. To those of you that are watching, we're going into a short break. We'll come back here. We'll have the panel. Please keep sending us your comments. Please send us your comment on the numbers on the screen, 0719 666655. Please don't call, just send a text and a question or comment on that number. And then, of course, on the social media platform, whatever social media platform you are following us from, please write your comment there or your question to any of the panelists, and we'll read those and we interact with you, we'll engage. So please stay with us. I believe you're going to enjoy this. So we go into a short break. God bless you.
Today's pastor is not evangelizing, yet he needs to evangelize.
Never outgrow soul winning. Never.
Never.
I tell you what, if I sit with you in the plane next to you, going to Europe, going to America, 8 hours, by the time we land, either you are on your knees or your tears are coming out. I will not forgive you to sit next to me and go to America as a sinner or go to another country as a sinner.
No.
You, pastor, you are rising up. You, man of God, you are rising up. But this is a time to sharpen our weapons. And we will tell the generation to come that we went through tough time, but God saw us through. A righteous man falls 7 times, but he rises up.
Have a discussion with our panel here. On my right hand, I'll start on the other end with Hamala. Good morning to you, sir.
Good morning.
It's a pleasure to have you. And we also have our regular on Sharia Wiki. He's always leading the team and the panel on Sharia Wiki every Friday. Dr. Ekuru Wakot, who is the chief, who was part of the architects of the Katiba 2010. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Bitok, and good morning, viewers. Good to see you.
I'll also go to the other end. I'll start with my brother. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
You've already been awarded a professorship, and I'm actually surrounded by all doctors. And I remember my brother was saying, I'm going to be the next doctor. Amen. Even a traditional doctor, an herbalist is still a doctor. So you never know where I'll feature. But Karibu Sana. Again, it's a pleasure to have you. And also, you're going to have Daktari Musumba. Good to see you. Hope you're well.
Hello,
good morning. The Katiba 2010 is turning 11 officially. This is the first time that you're actually having a birthday party for the Katiba 2010. I don't know if it is informed on the threads that he has been able to experience this year, or it's only good luck, or that we have it. And I hope you're going to keep the spirit. So we're going to have a discussion around Katiba 2010. What is it? What is Katiba, first of all? I think we need to start from there before we talk about anything else. Let's talk about Constitution. Katiba ni nini? So I'll start with you, Daktari Ekuru. What is the Constitution?
Basically, a constitution is just a collection of laws and rules that must govern a country. It creates institutions and then it apportions power to those institutions. And those institutions in enforcing the constitution must work together but for the people. So essentially a constitution creates at least 3 arms of government. The legislature, the one that makes our laws, the executive, the one that enforces our laws, and the judiciary, the one that interprets our laws. But they must all work together. But it also creates another now arm of government, an institution that's called the independent constitutional offices. That's why you have the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, the National Land Commission, and all those. But whatever the case is, they must serve the people of Kenya, which is why you can see in our constitution, we begin by saying that all sovereign power and authority emanates from the people. they must exercise directly or indirectly. So it's an acknowledgement that the constitution is not for the political class, it's not for the leaders, it's for the people and it's for the country.
Okay. Asante sana. That is from your crew.
But there are so many teachers of law here, including the professor.
I'm surrounded by all the doctors in law, so I'm sure you're going to have a very good definition. Dr. Linda Musumba, I'll start with you.
Yes.
What do you think is a constitution?
At a practical and experiential level, the constitution is the reason why and all of us experience the constitution. There's nobody who doesn't experience it. It's the reason why in your ward, you see flyers and posters up requesting you to come and give your views about various laws that are being promulgated at the county level. It's the reason why we have counties, and it's the reason why we have national government. It's the reason why a principle like public participation, which was not a hallowed principle before the 2010 constitution, is now a very integral component of what we do. So it's the reason why several legislations that have been made by Parliament or laws that have been passed have actually been thrown out because of the lack of public participation. So the constitution is something that you experience because it is when you walk out of your door or even while you're in your house, it determines a lot of your rights and obligations as well as a citizen. So there isn't a single person in Kenya who doesn't experience it. Your security, whether it's food security, whether it is the security of yourself, all these things are guided by the constitution through the institutions that my brothers have been able to bring out that are responsible for ensuring that your citizenship as a Kenyan, you enjoy exactly everything that the constitution provides.
All right, thank you. Professor Jack Mali, what do you think is the constitution?
Perhaps what they have said, but just to add one more element to it, that the constitution doesn't necessarily have to be the written document, but it is the values that underpin what is written in that document. You'll find there are other countries like Israel, like the UK, New Zealand, they don't have a written document. That is not to say that they don't have a constitution. There are certain critical values that they uphold that are so important to the operationalization of the systems that Dr. Aukot and Dr. Hamal have mentioned, that it inheres as a constitution, not necessarily by having been written down. And if you look at our constitution of 2010, it actually acknowledges those values beyond what is written in the document. So for example, if you look, apart from the values that it enshrines, when it talks about human rights, it says it's not the constitution that accords you those rights. It is just a recognition of principles that exist. So the constitution is that entirety of those values that we want in our system. And number two, I want to point out that constitutions are also about limitation of exercise of state authority. It's not just establishment of institutions, but also limitation of the values or the powers that are exercised by those who are given those public authority. And that is the essence of now constitutionalism. We are giving you this power, but we also limit you because the real sovereign authority does not belong to you, it belongs to the people.
All right, as Dr. Gerald, now I'm a doctor by association, I've made a conclusion that the constitution is a contract between the people and its leadership. I don't know if I've learned one. All right. So I'm now officially a doctor. The constitution is a contract between you, we the people, and that's what the preamble says, we the people give ourselves this constitution. I'm doing well. All right. Now, since we know what the constitution is already, the question and the theme of the year is, or the theme of the day today is, should it bark or bite? Not that we know what it is. We know it's a dog, it's a bulldog, it's a bobble, whatever it is. Should it bark, just bark, or should it also bite? Ekuru, now that we know what it is, should it bark or also bite?
You know, it doesn't necessarily have to bite or even bark. It must serve us. You know, one of the geniuses of Kenya's constitution, I will always say, is chapter 6, leadership and integrity. You know, one of the things that Kenyans reflected over a longer period of time is that one of the frailties of our society is the failure of leadership to serve us, that we don't have servant leadership. The same way pastor serve us by, you know, dishing out to us the word of the good Lord. So Kenyans crafted chapter 6 and say, we want this type and character of leaders who must then, when we give them that public office, you know, they must serve us. They must bring respect to that office. I think what we have now seen in these 11 years, yes, we've created these offices, but these offices don't seem to be serving us. Perhaps that's why they're just backing, because we have put the wrong people in charge of those offices. You know, a constitution may not be worth even the paper it's written on if we don't breathe life into it. That's what Prof. PLO Lumumba was saying earlier. We must breathe life into this constitution, so that if you are talking about, say, the Bill of Rights, to what extent are the Bill of Rights, my rights being respected, my right to property? And so if we had the whole day, we probably walk Kenya towards all the 15 chapters, 17 chapters of the Constitution. But each of those chapters must mean something. For example, Kenyan said, let's create a chapter called Chapter 12, Public Finance. Then they started by saying, in that public finance, what are the principles of public finance? We must use our money prudently, so that the taxes we collect, we must put them into good roads, hospitals, you know, schools. And that's when the Constitution then should be, we should say, when somebody flouts that aspect of Chapter 12, for example, misusing public money, then the Constitution must punish that person. The law must punish that person. That's when we expect the Constitution to actually bite, call for accountability. That's why in Article 10, we're talking about national values and principles of governance. To what extent are those being implemented? Corruption, for example, when people are given money to say, I'm going to build you a road, I'm going to build you a hospital, but we don't see that hospital at the end of the day. But the Auditor General comes and audits you and says, Dr. Musumba, you have not done the road that you said. So we, by virtue of the Constitution, we must be able to punish you. Maybe we should now stay away from just calling it corruption. Let's call it theft of public money. And if it's theft of public money, then we take you through the rigors of the law and the Constitution, and we must see you end up in jail. That's when the Constitution must be biting. Otherwise, we keep on talking about it as, you know, just corruption, then the Constitution is backing, but not biting.
Dr. Kamala, I think it's already backing. The fact that you're talking about it means it's already backing. The question is, as it back, should it continue backing, or it should also bite?
Gerald, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Gerald. And I want to again reiterate that it's not simply a contract between the governed and the people being governed. It is a contract first among the people being governed with each other. We don't have a government yet. And this, to realize that, think of colonialism when we inherited the Independence Constitution. At that level, you and me as Kenyans, or our forebearers, did not have an opportunity to have a referendum and to discuss among ourselves as Kenyans what kind of institutions and what kind of limitations do we want to give the government. The British colonialists bequeathed the people at Lancaster House and said, take this, the Westminster model, and go and govern people in rural areas and people who might not have been conscious of the debates going on at Lancaster House. 21st century constitutions are different. They have first been a rejection of alien or imposed governments, and there has been a discussion by Wanjiku, Atieno, Nafula, and everybody among ourselves first, and then we have said, look, we value rights, as Professor Mumali has said, that can never be taken away from us. There can never be torture. There can never be disappearances. There can never be a denial of fair trial in Article 25. So those are fundamental, and we have sat down as Kenyans before we have decided who will lead us and how we will structure parliamentary or presidential system. We have also decided there must be public participation, representative government. It's a principle called no taxation without representation. So in the first place, we have said we are not going to give anybody our taxes, and people must account for these taxes. And you cannot take the taxes and increase your salaries without telling us how, without our mandate and without the people's representatives being in parliament. So that tells you have to have periodic elections. There must be rule of law, and that means everybody must be equal under the law. So once we have discussed and said, this is the kind of lives we want to lead, this is a good society, this is how we want to end up, then we say now, how shall we structure institutions to give us and to secure these rights that we have already given ourselves from our gods? So from that standpoint, now you can look at does the constitution back or bite? If our leaders and our representatives do not serve us well, we remove them from their positions and we surcharge them and they are held accountable. But that servant leadership, that orientation that our leaders are chosen by us to say a concluding point has best been illustrated in, let me say, France. Because France 1789, ordinary merchants came out onto the streets, they removed the king and Antoinette, they beheaded them and said, this is a republic, it's a people's republic. There's no land that belongs exclusively to the king. Who gave it to them? Did they make it? And they took each other seriously and they gave themselves France as a republic. Now, as Kenyans and as Wanjiku, we are the defenders. And this constitution, we give it to ourselves. And then we periodically engage one of us to take a responsibility and serve for a period of time and come back to account. Now, once that perspective is taken to heart, then you can see the bucking and the biting. It is us at the end of the day who will hold them accountable, and therefore they will act on delegated power. They can't simply come and change it. These are not your values, these are your values. We are the ones who told them in the first place, these are our values, defend them, or we will come after you.
All right, so it should bite. Okay. Daktari, Linda Masumba. Should it continue backing, or is time it started biting?
Thank
or do you think
Gerald.
it's already biting?
In my view, it must do both. And it must do both effectively. When a dog barks, it is letting you know, or it is telling you that it's conscious and aware that you are there. So at a level of barking, the Constitution must continue, and the persons who superintend the Constitution, who is our leadership as well as each one of us, we must continue to highlight those issues that need to be done or that must be done. Biting, when a dog bites you, it has let you know without equivocation that it has got you in its sight, and it is actually going to bring you to compliance. Because I don't think there's anybody who can be bitten by a dog and you continue to just, be like, be like there's nothing that has happened, yeah? So it must bite. So I want to just use the area in our country of resource allocation and resource disbursement to be able to highlight this issue of barking and biting. So there is nobody who doesn't know about the contention there has been between the national and county governments with respect to the issue of resource allocation. I think people will be aware of the discussions that there were in the Senate during the development of the Division of Revenue Allocation Bill, and all those debates that took place that were very, very emotive. So to date, we are not satisfied with the 15% minimum that the Constitution has allocated for counties. But as was mentioned by our previous speakers, it's a minimum and it can be expanded. And hence the attempt by the promoters of the BBI bill to bring it to 35% and put it in law. But the question that everybody's asking, the 15% that is due to the counties, because as we speak today, it's just, I think, last week or this week that the National Treasury has released funds to the counties. This is like, a couple of months after the budget. We know last year as well, coming into this year, many counties did not receive the resources that they need to be able to do what they're supposed to do. And we know the functions of the counties. One of them is health, that has been fully devolved. Health on its own takes a lot of resources to be able to mount primary health care, as well as run surgeries and all those things. These are things we see in the press and we experience them when we go to our health centers. Now, under the pandemic, we know that oxygen is an issue. Oxygen is an issue, and this is year 2 of the pandemic, and oxygen is still an issue. We know that people have to leave our rural areas to come to Nairobi for healthcare, on the oxygen, on the pandemic issue. So in terms of resource allocation, what about the agriculture field, where farmers, constantly are talking about the money that they need to be able to, to do effective agriculture. And this is replicated in all sectors. So there's the resource allocation, number one, and then now the distribution. Look at, for example, the different, vulnerable groups in our country that are identified in the Constitution. How much money has been set aside to enable programs that empower women, programs that empower persons with disability, programs that empower the youth, programs that empower the education sector, how much has been disbursed to each one of these? Because there's a constant complaint that money is not reaching where it should. Universities are running down because they keep complaining that they don't get the money that they're supposed to get either on time, or sometimes, of course, it has been diminishing as time goes by. So in terms of backing, the issues must continuously be profiled publicly and at the lowest level possible. In terms of biting, where things don't get done, it must bite, because if it doesn't bite, then we continuously slide into a morass, because the things that need to get done, for example, in our hospitals, don't get done. The things that need to get done in agriculture and all those sectors don't get done. So in my view, it's both. It must do both and do both effectively.
All right. Thank you. Dr. Gichuki Gerald.
Now, let me pay homage, especially to us, to those in this room who took part in the birthing of this constitution. Dr. Okot has said, it may not be the perfect constitution, but I want to say, nonetheless, it's a thoroughbred. It's a thoroughbred constitution. Work was put to it, and a good work was put to it. Professor Lumumba, you are part of that program. I want to pay homage to you. Now, if you talk about biting and backing, we are talking about a dog. In our situation, a thoroughbred dog, the constitution. A thoroughbred dog must have 3 elements. Number one, it must know when to stay quiet. Number two, it must know when to bark. And number 3, it must know when to bite. These 3 elements are enshrined in the thoroughbred that is our constitution. Now, there is need for biting. Let me start at the top level. Because when you see things are not going right, then there are mechanisms for biting. We go to the courts, we get those orders, we go to the streets, we enforce those orders, we tell the powers that be that what we want is for you to implement our charter. It's our charter, and therefore we have every right to enforce it. And the enforcement mechanisms, and I think by and large they're operating, especially from the judicial perspective. There is the time for backing. Professor Lumumba has said, these are people who would not hear. They are so immersed in power that you cannot just fight them out. And they have the machinery of government to do it. I remember, I think it was Mwangale during the inquest for after the death of JM, when they were presenting the report, he gave this analogy. He said, I think a rabbit was speaking to a rock, and the rock wasn't listening or wasn't responding. And it got to a period, he says, even if you do not respond, at least you've heard what we have said. I'm talking about what we call the nuisance value. It must get to a situation where we must also operate on a nuisance value. We will take you to court, you will violate or you will avoid implementing the court decisions, we'll hold you to account, we'll go out in the hills and speak to you. Even if you don't listen, or even if you don't respond, you have heard. That is the second. Of course, I know the third element that I've talked about is what the government want to allude to. That these people from the civil society are noisemakers. That there are times things are happening well and they don't speak. They only see what is wrong. They don't see what is happening that is good. You see, a good dog doesn't bark when things are operating appropriately. So if they do their work properly, we are not going to bark. Or the Constitution ought not to bark. If they are not doing it properly and we see that they are not willing to do it, then we need to bite. But in between, sometimes we need to prompt them by just barking.
Is the Constitution an offer?
Implementation of the Constitution is a continuous process. It didn't end with Nyachai Commission. Because again, Article 3 is very clear. It is our responsibility as Kenyans to respect, to uphold, and to protect this Constitution. So let's not wait for our elected officials. And we have an opportunity in 2022 that if these parliamentarians, if this government has not implemented this Constitution, we use the power of the vote to bring in new leadership that will actually implement this constitution. And if you are short of candidates, Sekuro Okot is here as
you are here.
And I'm happy to help you with implementing this constitution because I know what it means to negotiate it at that table at that time. So as Professor.
So even if today you turn blind, you can still find the corners.
I'll still find the corners.
All of us are equal, and we must take that equality seriously. There is no mkubwa, wenye inchi, and somebody who is a chokora. One man, one vote. And that's the basis upon which we stay united as a country. There is no one person, 20 votes. And that doesn't matter, even if some people have, talent is distributed unevenly, randomly. Somebody is a very talented orator, somebody else a very good athlete, somebody else. But within the space called Kenya, we have all manner of talents. And we respect that in a family, you have to share the resources. If somebody is more efficient in one resource, you transfer to another resource. This is now nation building. This is what we say to one another as Kenyans so that we can progress as a society. Having said that, we are equal. We recognize that there are, let's say, wealthy people who call themselves the ruling class, and they believe that they have a higher stake of investment, or that when anti-corruption laws are made, because he's asking about chapter 6 of the Constitution, those laws only exist on paper to the extent that they do not threaten the interests of the ruling class. But we must be aware of the grave danger of big corporations, whether it's Microsoft, whether it is the big corporations which invest and don't want to pay workers a decent wage, or they don't want to pay health and safety precautions for workers so that when cranes fall on them, they won't pay insurance. And we have to ask ourselves as citizens, what about the life of that Kenyan? It could be my brother, my sister, it could be me. Is life worthless among us as a value, or is life equally valued? Then we make people with disproportionate amount of wealth pay for accidents or injuries which they cause, and they cannot use money to corrupt institutions that we value, institutions of equality. And therefore the anti-corruption laws, which seem to be there on paper, but when it comes to the EACC taking cases to court, and then the number of people who are put on one charge sheet, and finally who can get convicted, you don't have situations like Zuma, because he built a firewall and public money in his house, therefore he's in prison for 15 months for defying court orders to go to attend court. In our country, apart from the recent Waluke and Grace Wahungu, we do not have serious convictions. We have people going to court so that we can see some drama on the newspaper, but we need to have the Constitution being seen to apply equally. That happens in serious countries. Professor Lumumba will tell you that they execute people in China for corruption. Here we elect people who have disproportionate, unexplained wealth. And that is something we should introspect about, and we should take the responsibility ourselves to respect upright people and vote for them when it counts, and reject. Don't call people to be a guest of honor in a school if they are known participants in a scandal. So there's a public responsibility, and we must stand out and be heard to speak about it, to be heard and seen rejecting money that is dished out in churches when we don't know where it is coming from.
Okay, all right. Daktari Linda Musumba, the question is it an orphan? In less than 30 seconds.
Gerald, it's not an orphan. If I use the three arms of government just to demonstrate, in the judiciary, we've seen decisions that have been made by magistrates and judges that have actually gone a long way in restating the rights of Kenyans, in putting Kenyans who've been in a terrible way in a place of comfort. One thing that comes to mind very quickly is, of course, in the area of evictions of people from, places where they are staying and being thrown out inhumanely. We have court decisions that have now come to be able to provide a mechanism to ensure that people are not thrown out, in a way that is really, really, difficult for them to cope with. In the area of the legislature, we have got parliamentarians who have brought bills. Some bills never, are never highlighted because they are not, bombastic, if I may put it that way. But there are some bills that have really gone a long way in making a difference in the lives of Kenyans. So we also applaud parliamentarians who are playing their role. When you come to the executive, in our public service, our civil service, there are people who are seated behind desks implementing the constitution. There's the accountant, there's the clerk, there is the officer, there is this different people playing different roles, implementing our constitution in different ways. But at a very, very pronounced level, there's what Dr. Aukot said. Come August 2022, you and I will have an opportunity to evaluate who it is that we put in place for the next 5 years. People that we know that are people of integrity and are going to serve us. Because we've also had an opportunity during this COVID pandemic to be able to evaluate the quality of the people that we elected in the previous elections, whether they have been backing about the issue of vaccines, whether they have been backing about the kind of medical health services we're getting, and so forth and so on. So it's our opportunity come next August to be able to bite, to both back and bite.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. You'll have another opportunity in a few months. They say now, after backing, you've started today, led by us, the doctors, you're going to bite. Now, Dr. Jack Mimani.
I agree entirely with what the good doctors have said, and suffice only to add that, in as much as we are also hailing the judiciary for the good works that they are doing, they should not sleep on their laurels. There are a number of course, some of what you may term questionable decisions that also minimize the ability of the Mwananchi to implement the constitution. And Dr. Aukot has mentioned about the structures, for example, for enforcement of accountability, recall. Every time a person is followed because they have done something that is wrong and you want to remove them, the first port of call is the court. And in most cases, then they will use the technical or technicalities of the process to avoid accountability. 2010 Constitution, 2012 elections. There was Mutura, I think he was the member of parliament for Embakasi, charged, convicted. And then at the election time, he goes and says, oh, I have the opportunity to request for appeal. The time has expired. He goes and looks at the law and says, the law also permits expansion of or extension of time to file an appeal. So he does that. And he goes to court. And of course, when the court looks at it, it says he has not exhausted all his remedies. He's been convicted. It is beyond time. But he uses that time. And he stays in office. What happened? They didn't follow even on that appeal after a declaration had been made that he had to be given that opportunity. He served his 5-year term. You see, those technicalities, the courts must employ ways and means of trying to check them so that we can enforce the constitution. We will support them when they are doing well. We will run to them as a last fort, but we will also call them out if they do some things that we feel is not right. We
must back at them as well.
Okay, all right.
As we celebrate this constitution, can we pause the debate on the constitution first? Because we're talking about 264 articles. And go back to the 10 commandments. Maybe if we live by the 10 commandments, we may not even need this constitution. Just a challenge back to the church.
All right. Thank you. It's been a pleasure having you, ladies and gentlemen, fellow doctors and professors. It's been great having a conversation with you and the audience that has been with us. Thank you, Elevate TV, and also the church for giving us an opportunity to have this discussion. It's been a pleasure having you. The guests who honored our invite to have a discussion today and the panel that we have today. It's been an amazing conversation. And I always say as well is, without you, the audience, we could never be. Thank you for all the guys who make time every single morning to listen to these conversations. And I hope now you're going to be a better Kenyan. Now you know what the constitution is. Whether it backs or bites, it's up to you. As we move forward, let's realize that the country is in our hands. It's the responsibility of every citizen to ensure that we make this country better. Until next week, see you and bye-bye. Signing off.